where we left off, Matter of Diagnosing Innovation, we're going to frame, observe, and question. Then we looked at whenever we frame, the three frames that we considered using were the panorama and the portrait, and then we looked at the vintage, the Polaroid, so the quick snaps. Then we looked at observation. When we observed, we looked at the fall of Icarus. And so we used this painting by Brugger to look at first we had the big scene, then we looked at that scene was actually made up of individuals, and those individuals were all doing their own thing. And then we thought about, well, how did they respond to this new innovation that was coming into their neighborhood? How did they react to it? So, and then the five that we looked at were the plowman, the shepherd and his dog, and then there's the tall ship, then the fisherman, and finally we thought about what do you think the bird was thinking? Remember, that was what an amateur, this human-powered flight. He doesn't really know what he's doing. Then the last thing we looked at was we're going to ask questions, and we looked at asking good questions. So, asking them, we're going to seek out new places to go, and we're going to knock on doors we've never knocked on before. So we're going to ask those kinds of questions. We're going to question important topics, and then we're going to do that with well-intentioned feedback. So when we looked at asking, it was, remember Aquinas and Kipling? If they had a dinner party, you'd be surrounded by terrific questions. And then we thought about I love these two very powerful words, which are what if. If you use what if, almost immediately, you're going to engage your imagination, your creativity, that little sugared up 7-year-old inside of you, and you're going to really look at things differently. So always remember what if. Then we looked at the well-intentioned feedback, and that was where we were going to ride a grinning rhino, and we're going to ride at the Looping Ranch. Remember, we're going to review what we've done. We'll revise whatever needs to be changed, and then renew our commitment to be innovators that are going to ask questions. And we use the looping so it's just sort of remind you, a little memory aid that feedback loops. So we're going to be looping and then review, revise, and renew. All right, so then that brings us to the area we were going to look at today, which were that right there in the middle, that chewy nougat center that you've all been wondering about. So what are these important topics? And I invited you to think about, since we spoke earlier this week, what do you think as you're coming into this program now, and as you're looking at, maybe taking some of your first steps into a new area, or maybe it's your first time to think about, jumping into a company or taking one of your ideas and actually let it see the light of day. So as you think about that, the three that I want us to spend our time on is to think about your business, your habits, and your creativity. And so now we're going to go a little deeper into that now and start looking at each one of these. So the first thing, the business, we're going to do business and habits today, and then on Saturday, just because it is one of my favorite topics, and we're going to look at creativity. So we have the business, and then habits, and then we'll do creativity on Saturday. So the business, when we think about the topic of your business, what does that look like? So this falls underneath a talk that I have called the 6 steps from ideas to markets. So let's start to look at that. There's our friend, there's the panorama. So this is one of the reasons why we wanted to have the panoramic view, because this is that sweep of your ideas then entering into markets. So there's going to be that big wide view. Remember, when we looked at the panorama, this allows us to take everything in. That's the goal here. Take in everything that's going to, your business will have to do to go from ideas to markets. So let's divide it in half. There's a product side, and then there's the market side. So one of the first things that's got to happen is your idea has to begin to look like a product. And then you have to begin to think about those markets. You'll see why I divided it in half here in just a second. So the other thing that you've got to be aware of, and this is where I'm going to start getting just a little bit more tactical. If you'll notice on the product side, so to the left of the dashed line, I put inside and private. And on the other side of the dashed line where the market is, that's outside and public. And this is something to keep in mind, particularly as you're looking at innovation within the regulated industries. Always takes a little bit longer. There's always lots of the regulations, those requirements that have to be met. So there is necessarily a period of time and many things that will happen that are not public, nor do you want them to be public. And actually, in a lot of ways, things that become public can actually become fatal to your company's operations. So this is one of the first big breaks where we need to start to think a little more clearly about what we're doing and to recognize that there are times when we have to be inside and we need to be private with what we do, and there are other times when it is inescapable. You must be outside. You have to be public. You can't do it otherwise. So this is a big difference. You go over and talk to people that are innovating within high tech, or they're going to make an app, or it's something that's going to be sold, through the Apple Store or something like that. Some high tech product, you could go to Walgreens and pick it up. That's not the same thing. You've got a very different challenge, and you've got to begin to think about how your business will operate, knowing that there's going to be this clear point in time whenever you can't be private anymore for some parts of your business. Other parts of your business, you'll still be able to maintain that, but you have to be aware of when you really don't have any choice, but you need to be prepared for what's going to happen next. Okay, so now what are these 6 steps? The first one is you got to transition from ideas to idea, really getting concrete. So how do you go from, I've got all this I want to do, there's everything you thought about, and then that line is sort of like the first day when Jennifer and Desert were like, hi, welcome. Pick one thing to work on. I mean, you're going to get there eventually, but I'm not saying you did that on day one, but you will get there eventually. But you've got lots of ideas, and then it's got to become focused. So getting down to the one thing you're going to work on and the thing that's going to help you so that you can go through the program and really be successful. It'll give us, whenever we're going through sessions later on, it gives us something to talk about. Because frankly, I just need you to have something that you're excited about, because if you haven't noticed, I get sugared up just about every idea that I hear about. So it's easy for me to get excited. I just need you to come with the idea that gets you excited, and we'll have a ball, and we'll go through these things over and over again. But it'll be working on, that little ball of clay that you want to make something out of. So the first thing, got to get an idea. Next, begin to think about a product. The idea, ideas of themselves don't really help anybody. It has to be translated into a product. It's got to become something. It needs to be in a useful form so that somebody called a customer can actually get it from you. So from idea, we've got to get to think about products. And then after that, particularly within the regulated industries, and here we're really focused on healthcare, it has to be evaluated. So how do you evaluate products? This is when you'll start to think about the data that's needed. It sounded like you guys were talking about, electronic medical records and some of the record keeping that goes on. Think about everything you have to do for a clinical trial. If you're testing materials, and how all of that's going to happen. Evaluation. And again, this is the thing, this is still inside. This is still on the private side. So this might be testing and evaluation. Could be prototyping. It could be maybe you're going to do some animal studies. All the kinds of things that are going to help you understand and evaluate whether or not your idea in this form of the product is going to meet what is necessary or needed by this market. Now, the next thing we start to look at, now, look, we've crossed the line. Now we're on the other side. Particularly in healthcare, but very common in all the regulated industries, there is always some form of approval. And here, the first one we think of in healthcare is the FDA. If you're going to produce a device or make a drug and sell it to people or place it into commerce or make it available for others, and you do that without the approval of the FDA, and that FDA approval is required, that's illegal. That's a criminal act, and there will be nothing but a world of trouble for you if you do that. So the approval and that process of approval and what those requirements are, that's a necessary thing that must happen. But as you can see, we know right where it fits. We know when we've got to get to that, but we know we have to get through approval in order for us to move forward with our idea. The next one is payment. Everybody wants to get paid. It's kind of part of running a business. If you run a business and have ideas and make products and evaluate them, but you never get paid, that business won't last very long. So you've got to think about payment. But here's the odd thing, and this, again, particular to regulated industries. Sometimes the person that's paying is not always the person that's getting the service, or not getting all of the service, or is not making all of the payment. And you know what I'm talking about. These are subsidized sometimes. Think about the power system. You know, sometimes the government may, for certain parts of the year when it's really, really hot and everybody's running their air conditioners, well, you know, maybe in some parts of the country, they might subsidize that so that they know everyone's going to do it. They know it'll be a huge burden on everyone's bottom line every month. So they subsidize some of the power requirements during the summer. The classic example, and one you're going to be getting very familiar with if you're not already, we all have health insurance, but now you're going to start looking at that intersection of health insurance payments. What you pay, you know, your copay, what the insurance company picks up, what the hospital's looking for, what the doctor gets at the end of the day, and whether or not that all works out is all part of figuring out payment. You're also going to find that there are standard rates of payment, and this comes from CMS, Medicare and Medicaid. You know, the federal government will outline what they believe are the standard or accepted prices for certain services, for certain products. And if your pricing varies from that, you're probably going to have to talk about that, or at least address it, or you have to recognize that if you serve that patient base, they're not going to be paying enough for what your product costs. So sometimes that becomes a big factor, but that payment, how does that payment happen? That's something that's going to be really important. And it's the second to last thing we're going to do, because the last one is, if we figure all that out, then you can begin to scale. Because now you've addressed all the needs of your product, you've addressed your market, and now if you just begin to do this more and more, now your company will begin to scale. So what is the company doing? Like, what's happening as you're going through this process? And some of you may have seen this before, or you've heard about this, the whole idea of, you know, translation and commercialization. Well, this is how I think it lays out, that in the very beginning, this idea, you know, ideas to idea to product. And notice it doesn't really go all the way through product, but that's really translation. I don't personally view translation as, you know, science into, you know, something that begins to look like a really confined experiment or some set of operational parameters. It really does need to take that step into some part of our society or some part of the economy. That this is where science intersects, or that's where this engineering breakthrough intersects, and that's translation. So then the next thing that happens is the commercialization. How do you say, okay, now we know where it's supposed to go, we know where this product should fit. Does it fit? Can the economics begin to work out? Can we get something like this approved? You know, will we be able to get the right kind of payment? And then finally, you'll see that if you get those first two pieces in place, then you can build out an organization, and there's lots of people that can help with that. You know, ramping up your production in a factory, hiring more and more physicians that have received your training and understand your product, going out and meeting with an ever increasing number of hospital systems. That build out of the business, that can all happen at scale, and there are lots of people that can help with that. But these two initial steps, you could almost imagine that if you look at from build out to commercialization to translation, it's almost like there's an inverse number of people. As you start going down, there's fewer and fewer people until you get down to that one person or that team that actually has the ideas that are going to turn into an idea that will begin this process of translation. And so then as that begins to grow, more and more people are involved. And oftentimes this is exactly why you see that a startup will need to go out and raise increasing amounts of money as they move further and further down this. So you can imagine, to get in the very beginning of this, you don't need very much capital to get through some of these early stages, or moving from, ideas to idea. Frankly, you'll be doing a lot of that now, and all you're going to be doing is, burning up sticky notes and wearing out the whiteboard. And that doesn't really cost a lot, except for your energy and your thoughts and your creativity to really be present and do that work. But you don't need to go out and raise an A round in order to, step through everything you're thinking of and begin to work on those early stages of translation. So there's, what's going on during each of these stages. And then I thought about who is doing it. So who is acting? Who's really involved in these kinds of activities? So the first one is, I don't remember right off the top how many biomedical engineers there are, or if you're a member of the Biomedical Engineering Society, but I did that almost as a joke. So it's BMES, but what do I mean? I mean people that are in biotech, they got a medical background, there's engineers, and there's scientists. And that's what I mean by BMES. Again, use something easy that I think you'll remember, so that you can kind of think about, do I have these other people around me on the idea that I'm working on? And do I need them? They may not need all these people, but maybe you do. And then I always think that these are people that they're working on the translation. Really, what we're focused on here, a lot of the work that I do at Stanford Biodesign, that is really science-based health tech. So this is the group of people, or the kinds of skills that are in these teams that are trying to do these this step of translation. The next, there's another group that's going to show up, and they're the ones that are going to start to carry a lot of the water as you move through evaluation and out into approval. And this is the clinical and regulatory organizations. These are, QA departments, and having all these other parts of the business that are necessary in order for the company to actually pass through this phase successfully. You cannot approach the FDA if you don't have design freeze, if you don't have a product that's manufactured in a quality system that's actually a legitimate quality system. You just can't do it. So at some point, you're going to need to have these other people around and bring these skill sets in. That's usually whenever you start to figure out, I can get a consultant to do that, or is this somebody I need to hire? And a lot of times it's when the company gets to a certain scale, then you start to shift that decision. It's less on consultants, and you really want to have that, you want to bring that knowledge in-house, because it's just better for the team and it makes the company run better. But that's another group of people. You're going to see them start to show up. And again, great time to start thinking about, do I know these people? Do I know what they do? Do I know how they help me? So that's the next group you're going to see. And then finally, and I love this, they really think this is really the tip of the spear for market access. And I call them heroes, which is health economics, reimbursement, and operations is kind of the way I think about it. It's actually not that, and now I don't remember what the actual one is. But you'll hear from these people, and I'm getting to know. My network is growing in this area because it's an area that I know the least about. So I'm always kind of interested in this. How do you figure out health economics? Like what are those pieces? And I've been so fascinated by this that back, I guess it wasn't this year, so last year at Columbia, they had some pitch contests, and one of my friends there that I've done stuff with the Orthopedic Research Society, he's like, I was in town, I represent one of the hospitals there, so sure, I'll come up to Columbia. It was really great fun. But with the faculty, they had their Biomedics, I think is what the pitch event was called. But with some of the faculty, I just began to say, that was always my question. So tell me about your health economics. Because it was amazing just to see what kind of answers they gave. Because I thought, well, maybe they know. And then I'll learn from them by asking this question, which I can't answer, but I'm very curious about. And increasingly, this is a chief failure mode, that the company will not be able to have the resources necessary, nor the pricing structure, to actually enter a number of different markets. So it's really one of these things that, I'm showing you this now and giving you this really broad view so that you'll think about all of this now. As you can see, just looking at this, alone with a shiny object for an idea, that's not even close to being enough to what you're going to need to have or be able to do for a company to take an idea, turn it into a product, and actually achieve scale. And when I say achieve scale, that's the great thing about working in healthcare. That means you're changing the standard of care. That means you're helping more patients in more places. That your company, if successful, will actually help raise the standard of care for maybe unserved patients, maybe changing the skill set of a clinical team or a hospital that doesn't have access to places like UCLA or come to Stanford or go to Boston and go to Harvard. Turns out they have a medical school. So you can't have access to that. But if your company does its job, that skill, that new thing is now deployable. It's actually something that they can learn, something they can be trained with. And now you've helped people, and you could be binge watching Netflix, but your company, the people that have been trained by your company, the products your company has made are out there all day, every day, waiting on the shelf in somebody's head about how they're going to work, ready to help that next patient that comes in that fits that clinical need. So, as I was preparing this, I had a pattern interrupt. I call this the pattern interrupt. So as I'm thinking about this and sort of reflecting on this, and this goes back to, this was a talk that I gave last year to this same group, to the fellows coming into the UCLA Biodesign program. So I was thinking more and more about this, and it's a lot of things have influenced me over the last few years. One of them is the D School at Stanford, and I got to go there with I've done a lot of work with Cliff Jews, one of my best friends, and just a great, ingenious sort of designer. And he was, part of IDEO for a long time, and so was David Kelly. David Kelly was the guy that really got behind the Stanford D School. So as I started thinking about this, I was reminded of David Kelly and some things that he's done. So now I've kind of blown up the left-hand side of this, ideas to idea, and then you can see the edge of product there. So I really want to take a closer look at that. And I really encourage you, go watch, David Kelly did a TED Talk, and he talks about creative mastery, or guided mastery. He's talking about creativity, but the talk is called Guided Mastery. And it's really important to understand that principle, because the idea behind guided mastery is it's something that you're unsure of, afraid of, don't understand, seems very, very far away from you. But with a certain number of steps and certain deliberate activities, you can actually begin to close that gap. And so I want you to think about that, and that's kind of what I've blown out here, is that you're looking at these new areas. You're going to have a lot of information coming at you. And one of the things that I want to share with you is this little, taking each one of these. Remember, we talked about, we have panorama, we have portraits, and then we have Polaroids. So here's a portrait that I want you to keep in mind, especially as you come back and look these things through, or as all these new things are coming up. And one of them is the, sort of the P-pot, right? So patient progress over time. So as you're looking at this, from 1 to 6, so patiently making that progress over time. And then on the y-axis, that's your, I want you really thinking about that guided mastery. And when you watch this talk from David Keller, he's actually, what he talks about is summarizing some work done by one of the psychologists at Stanford. But guided mastery, so I kind of distill that down to awareness to proficiency. So as you're going through each one of this, as we finish up today looking at this, you have awareness. You've already got that first layer is already on there. You've now got awareness of a very general framework to go from idea to products in market at scale. So I really encourage you to take a look at that, because as entrepreneurs and as you begin to learn more and you start to go outside your comfort zone, you're going to encounter these things where your awareness is very, very low, and maybe you're not going to be very patient with yourself. or you're going to have time pressures on top of you that are not going to allow you to be as patient as you want, but this will give you a handle. It'll give you a process that you can use whenever those situations occur. Okay, so now we're on to habits. So this is our second of the 3 areas. So now we're going to look at the habits. Now this talk is one called the 5 Habits of Perpetual Entrepreneurship. So the very first habit I want you to keep in mind is the habit of communication. And communication is really, you're going to talk. You're going to talk a lot. And so even what here I've got, just so tonight, hopefully, I think you've had a number of different conversations today, lots of different speakers, or maybe something I'm going to touch on today right at the end of the day. It's going to be, oh wow, today at Innovation Camp I learned, and you're going to text somebody or email them or call them or talk to your dog, your parrot, your cat. So you're going to be talking about things, and that's an important part of communication. So the other thing is you're going to need to listen. And so I've got my big elephant ears there, so I want to listen. I want to listen with both ears and really pay attention. If you think about the business plans that we just looked at, or that business, the 6 steps, those are areas in probably 2, 3 more. You don't have any idea what goes on there. And the only way you're going to have an idea is that you listen to other people and you allow them to teach you, and you become more coachable. So this listening skill is really that coachability skill. So learning how to listen to all the different things that are happening around you, or as circumstances change, and trying to pick up on those new cues of whatever is happening to you next. And I have this, how will you hear a who, and a what and a how. So listening, also listening for those questions. And trying to think about, maybe even internally, your own dialogue, and having those questions about, what is next and how am I going to do that? And you're going to be wanting to ask those questions we talked about in the very beginning. That's why that's in the very first module, is so that you really think about how to ask those good questions. But this is where we also need to think about listening to those answers. And then the last one is, who is in your audience? So this is one where I often find a lot of entrepreneurs get very excited. They want to talk. They're not listening to the people that are telling them to be quiet or to sit down because they're in a place that's not appropriate. They're not considering their audience. And I made this sort of look like a theater, so it's like, where are you speaking? Who are you speaking to? And what are you saying to them? And sometimes that situation can change very, very rapidly. And I've had this happen to me numerous times. I love to talk to people. And Jennifer can tell you, I'm half crazy right now because I'm not traveling. I'm not out there. I wish I was there with you guys live to do this. I love those interactions. But over the years, I've learned how important it is to have this lesson. Who is there, especially at like JP Morgan? You go to these giant parties and you join in to say hi to a friend that you haven't seen, and that's a lot of what happens for me at JP Morgan, is getting to see people I haven't seen, or it's been several months that I haven't seen them. And so you immediately want to start talking to them and hearing what's going on, and you forget there are 3 or 4 other people around, and that there's another group right next to you, and you don't really know who all those people are. So, very important, who is your audience, and who else is listening. So that's I used to, in this talk, I used to show one of those posters from World War II, loose lips sink ships, that the control of information is extremely important. And this is something that you will find is going to happen as you begin to progress, you start to work more within the healthcare system. Communication about a patient's status and HIPAA requirements. Sometimes there are laws about what can be communicated, just in the patent system. So, I spend most of my time working with people that are trying to get rights out of the patent office. Communication, talking about your idea before you filed, that can cause a big divot to be in your idea. It can make it very hard for you to get all the rights that you might be entitled to. So communication is, and that's why it's the first rule, There's so many things that can go sideways if you talk too much, you don't listen, and you're unaware of who your audience really is. In a positive way, you should talk and tailor what you're saying to that audience, and then listen for that good feedback. Remember, we're always going to be looking for that feedback. And then what are you going to learn? This is a part of how we can all ride at the Looping Re Ranch. So the second habit is self-knowledge. When we think about self-knowledge, it's really important to understand your family tree. And I'm not talking about 23andMe or Ancestry.com here. Your family tree is those people that you know, those experiences that you've had, the place you come from, and everything that has been part of your life that's made you who you are. So it's really more about you need to remember and know who you are, what you have, and importantly, what you don't have. Because sometimes it's that ability to realize the gap in your own understanding, the gap in your company's ability to execute on something, because frankly, you just don't have the skills around you. So this is what I mean in the family tree is, who are you? What have you got? And just being aware of, what kind of a tree are you? And where do you fit? What forest are you in? Those kinds of things. So you really have a good context for yourself. And then from that, you'll have a much better idea about your company. The next one, and it goes very much part of your family tree, is your story. What are you doing? Where have you been? Where are you going? And just having that awareness of, it will help you understand why you're doing things. For example, what's your story coming into this? I read all of your bios before, that Jennifer and Desert sent over, the little bio that you send about yourselves. So you've all done incredible things. So what is this? I doubt seriously for any of you that it'll be that, we'll go again here in a year's time when this program is over, and you'll pull out your bio and go, wow, and then there'll be one sentence, and then I attended UCLA Biodesign, period, and that'll be it. Or will the next thing be, I attended UCLA Biodesign, comma, and what will follow? I think it will be, I attended UCLA Biodesign, comma, and this great adventure unfolded, ... What will that be? So your story, making sure you keep that in mind. And then finally, there's you, just you, but there's the inside of you and there's the outside of you out into the world. And you just need to be aware of that. Everything that's going on inside your head, everything that, every wish that's on your heart, and then being aware of all the other people that are around you. Because as we looked at in the 6 steps, you're going to begin to interact, I hope, you'll begin to interact with all kinds of folks in all these other areas of our healthcare system that maybe you had sort of a passing understanding, or maybe you've just never thought about that. But now's the time to do that. And so when you do that, you're going to start going out into all these other worlds, and what a great chance to learn more about, these other segments of our healthcare system. All right, so the next habit, storytelling. This is my favorite of all the habits. I love storytelling. And here's the phrase that I want you to keep in mind. As you're going through this, remember in the 6 steps, we went from ideas to idea. So ideas to idea, this carries over in that same theme. One story to an ending, and then unlike what we did before, where we said, I went to UCLA Biodesign, comma, right? No period there, comma. But here, one story to an ending. Even if there are gaps and everything isn't perfect. I know you're not going to know all the answers. Those 6 steps, maybe you've never thought about market access. Maybe for you, market access is knowing that the Italian deli opens at 6 a.m. and they have a market. That's your market access. You're going to learn. But until then, keep that framework in mind. So storytelling here as an entrepreneurial habit is one story to an ending, even if there's gaps, even if it's not perfect. The next habit is zero in. So this one is important to remember that the details are going to matter. So the details will matter someday to someone. And that someone could be a physician that's considering buying your product. It could be a designer that's considering whether or not to consult with your company. It could be the FDA panel chair who's got a whole list of questions and you have no idea what details are going to be in there. So the details will eventually matter. The other one I'll tell you, which I should also mention, it could also be in a due diligence. And you could get an investor that just really wants to know about this one part of your business. And it may be a part of your business that you never really thought was that important. But to this investor, it's very important. So you never can tell, but you should be ready to zero in and you should have a habit that will help you to zero in. Then remember too, not all the details will matter all the time. So I'm not saying to make yourself crazy trying to keep all this stuff in your head or try to keep a handle on it, but there's going to be a lot of details. There's going to be areas where even now you don't know that much about it, but it will become important to the success of your business or your venture, and someone's going to have to deal with it. You're going to need to at least understand to that level so that you can successfully delegate and oversee whatever's being done by a consultant, or maybe you've got some expert that's on staff that just, you really have to trust them to know as a subject matter expert, they've got your back on that particular area. So that's the last thing about this. Every detail will have its day. And it may come up in one of those scenarios that I mentioned, but every detail will have its day. And it could be, and I've seen this in my work, patent office, you just never can tell when someday it may matter the way one figure was represented. It may matter the way that one claim was represented. It may matter what was said at some pitch contest at South by Southwest. Someday that may matter. So that's the kind of scenarios that things change. It's a very dynamic environment, and sometimes those details will come back, and you'll have to learn how to deal with that, and also have that awareness about this whole big picture in terms of how you're thinking about your company. And then last one on zero in was, essence is essential. So again, I know I'm telling you to think about details, but think about those details and the essence of what you're trying to do, because that will always help you kind of know what you need to be paying attention to, and things that you don't necessarily need to pay as much attention to right now, like at this moment. If you're barreling towards design freeze and you really are pinched because you've got to hit this milestone so you can go out and close your Series B, and the human resources manager comes in and says we want to take care of our employee manual. Remember, we said we were going to update that before October, and here it is, we're already barreling through September. Now's not the time. It's an important thing. Believe me, that detail, you're taking care of your employees, complying with federal and California law, absolutely. I'm not saying that. But if you don't get to the other side of your FDA approval, that milestone doesn't happen, there's not going to be any employees to worry about. So essence is essential. What's happening? What details matter right now? And then the last one is act accordingly. And this is really similar to talking and listening and who's in your audience. So where are you? What are you doing? Why are you doing it? Because your role as an entrepreneur, just think about this, and it's not a far off situation. We actually had the first day, we had two physicians come in and say, yeah, we sat in on this class last year, we went off and now we've got an idea, we've got a grant, now we're back, and they're already barreling towards having a product and perhaps moving towards having a company. So in that 1 year time, how many different roles and how many different ways did they act? They were always, they're both still physicians, that didn't stop. They have day jobs, that didn't stop. They're now probably inventors. They said they filed a provisional. That's a very different kind of activity. They had to get a grant, so that means they had to at least articulate a story to the granting agency. They've been talking to other people to try to get some help, maybe reaching out to the engineering departments. All these different scenarios and acting accordingly. Like your behavior and what's expected and what's needed in each of those situations is very, very different. So where are you? What are you doing and why? So this is situational awareness. I was in the Navy, and one of the great things that's out there is the OODA loop from the very, very early days before the Air Force was even really founded. And it was during the time whenever we began to have jets, but we didn't really know how to use jets to dogfight. And this situation would change extremely quickly. The aircraft are much faster, and the pilots had to have much, much better response time. And that's whenever they came up with, it's called the OODA loop. So the OODA loop, I want to think about it in terms of like our entrepreneurial OODA loop. So that's what the OODA loop is. You observe the situation, you orient yourself to what's happening, you decide on a course of action, and you take action. And then it repeats. Did your action change? Is your situation better? You observe your situation again, and then now you go back in again in that OODA loop. Now, your op tempo is going to change. You're not all going to be like, dogfighting F-18s on your first day, but you will have times whenever things are going to pick up and they're going to come at you really fast, and having something there to help you act accordingly no matter what the circumstances are. So that's it. Our next meeting is going to be on Saturday, where we're going to do the 3 phases of creative resiliency. This is far and away my most favorite talk. And it's one that started with a creative dare. I have what if in my life too. The creative dare was with one of my buddies back in Philadelphia. We did a whole talk for the Penn ecosystem. And he's like, Ben, what if you had to talk about intellectual property and all you had was a whiteboard and a pen? So it worked. That was the basis of this talk, and I can't wait to share it with you. Okay, I'll stop now and Jennifer, any questions or anything else for that?
Thank you, Ben. I'll turn it over to the fellows. We have time for maybe 2 questions probably before we break for our social distancing gathering.
Taking pictures with a helicopter again? What do you do? What are you guys doing tonight? Don't tell me. I don't want to know because I'll just be jealous.
We'll be sending drones up to Santa Clara, so be on the lookout.
Outstanding. Well, I'm just waiting. Like nobody asked for my photograph to mix me into the helicopter thing. You guys do all this stuff, and now just like a paper plate with a little drawing on it or something. At least I feel like I was there.
These are so funny.
Okay. Any questions?
Ben, when you come back, when we get you back to UCLA, maybe you'll get your helipad photo. We can add that to the bucket list.
Yeah, and I know what it'll be. It'll be like you guys will all already be at the restaurant, and then you will have told me that I need to go up to the roof, and that I need to wait, and that I'm supposed to stand there and like do my arms with these big flags, and that and then you guys will then call me from the restaurant after I've been up there for about 15 minutes and say, Ben, we were just kidding. But we have a full video of you. Yeah, I trust you, Jennifer. You guys will learn to trust Jennifer as much as I trust Jennifer. It won't take very long.
Well, thank you for that. Any questions for Ben before we break?
Yeah, I have a quick question for Ben. Ben, this is Wesley Jones. I'm a mechanical engineer and MBA candidate. Spent 9 years in electrophysiology for Medtronic and a startup. Just here with a bunch of like-minded fellows who become frustrated and annoyed in healthcare innovation, mismanagement, and latency. As an engineer, storytelling, communication, a couple of these habits are on my to-do list of improvement this year. I was hoping you could go into a little bit more detail on storytelling. I like how you put it, one story to an ending. I think, I don't know if I speak for myself or other fellows, but tends to tangent and get really long. Any advice on keeping the focus and keeping Desert happy? Because I know she doesn't like long stories.
Yeah, I think that's a really important area to frame that up, and that's why I said, all the way to the ending, even if there are gaps. And a lot of times, what I'll try to do is, and this is a little bit of a sneak into what we're going to be doing when we talk about creative resiliency, which is really what it is that you've got to get the idea out of your skull. That's the first thing. Nobody can help you. Nobody can touch it. Nobody knows what's inside your skull. So you have to get the idea out as completely as you can, and then place it into context. So a lot of times, what I'll try to do, particularly somebody like you've done a lot of stuff, and let's just say, for example, you were going to be doing innovation. You've been around Medtronic. You've seen how startups work. You've got a real base of knowledge in a particular area. But let's say, for example, you realize that there was another area of the body where what's known in, say for example, heart pacing, that sort of electronics and control system, that it's never been used on, pick an organ, right? The gallbladder has never been paced. And for some reason, which I will leave to your imagination, it becomes very important that the solution to gallstones is gallbladder pacing. So now, all of a sudden, we've got to, we'll just take that and use it. Really? There's a EKG wave on the gallbladder? I think the gallbladder is just it's got about the same waveform as a pickle, right? So now all of a sudden, but wait. It's not at all like the heart. Or maybe it is like the heart. I don't know. It moves a juice comes out, that's kind of like the heart. But wait a minute, the heart's really complicated and big. The gallbladder just kind of does one thing. So maybe you could do that, but how? And where would you place it? And how would you get to the gallbladder? So you can just imagine there's something you know a lot about, but nobody's done that for the gallbladder. Why would you? I don't know, maybe. Maybe there's a clinical need there, but if you did, start to tell that story from, how would I get it there? I've got this core of knowledge from heart pacing. How would I adapt it? What signals do I need? Go back. I mean, this is where I think the storytelling comes in. Go back. Have that dinner party. Get Aquinas, get Kipling, put your idea on the table. All those questions, and answer those questions and get to an endpoint. I would do it exactly the same. I wouldn't change anything. What result? I would only change the number of electrodes. Great. What result? I would use all those components, but my can would be dirt simple because I only think there's one thing we have to do. We need this to, elicit. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe the reason they have gallstones is they're not, it's not producing enough bile. Maybe it's producing too much bile. Oh, where's the bile knob? I'm going to use heart pacing to find the bile knob. So you can imagine each one of those issues will have to be sorted out, and take them one at a time. Think of something and take it to an ending, even if there are gaps and even if it's not perfect. And I think a lot of times for storytelling, particularly for engineers, is that unwillingness to kind of live with, I don't know this answer. Okay, great. Guess.
Nailed it.
Guess, right? Why not? I do it all the time in patent applications. Oh, did I say that out loud? Yeah, you just make a guess. It doesn't have to be right, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's your best shot. It's your best shot with what you've got and where you are right now. And usually that's enough.